The first Taoists were demon hunters. So perhaps you think that Taoism originated from old bearded men sitting in bamboo groves seeking inner peace. No. Taoism got its start from shamans 10,000 years ago who were seeking intense spiritual power so that they could defeat demons who were a threat to human existence. And it was their long, hard struggle of practical seeking and experimenting to gain spiritual power that ended up being those old men sitting in groves of bamboo trees, meditating for inner peace, doing qigong exercises next to rivers. That's not how it all started. Taoism technically isn't a religion. It is a practical, experiential practice of learning how to achieve energetic power in order to have the best possible life you can imagine. So I'm going to get into it and we're going to find out what Taoism really is, and you're going to find out that you're probably already a Taoist, and if not, I'm going to be sharing with you very practical, powerful ways that you can completely destroy negativity within yourself and in the external world. So let's get started here. So the proto-origins of Taoism has its roots in ancient folk shamanism. So we're talking 10,000 years ago, according to the traditions. According to the traditions, 10,000 years ago, shamans, and again, what is shamanism? Shamanism is really practical, living guidance. We think of shamans as being channels for spirits. But when you go back to the original understanding of the first people that were supposedly the first shamans, they were looking for food, shelter, good weather, good places to live, and the fastest way to do that was to connect into the internet of that age, which is the spirit world. So there would be specific people who would be born with the gift to be able to tap directly into that. They would go into a shamanic trance or deep meditation, and they would be able to fly across the world, and they'd see where the herds of animals were, or they'd see where the forests were, or they'd see where the fish were, or they'd know, what the weather was going to be like, all that kind of stuff. And they'd come out of the trance and they'd tell the chief, okay, you need to go here, and we need to pick up, and we need to go now. That's all shamanism is. It's just simply practical problem-solving technology. And when you continue to do that over many, many years, you start to learn from trial and error very practical tools to have the best life possible. But it started with just simply trying to stay alive. So the first Tao shamans sought spiritual power. So Taoism, what we know as Taoism, originally came from young shaman, probably mostly male. They were seeking power. Now, spiritual power is a good thing to have on a bunch of levels. It protects you from physical disease. It protects you from other enemies. It protects you from animals. But the main reason they wanted power was because they wanted to be able to protect themselves from what they perceived to be spiritual beings that would feed off of human energy. So in order to prevent being a meal for some spiritual predator, they tapped into power. And the more power they had, the less likely they were going to be attacked and eaten by these spiritual predators flying around. We're going to talk more about what those really are. So the first Taoist shamans sought spiritual power. Their core belief was that predatory spirits feed off of humans. So they had this core assumption about reality. They saw reality as this multi-leveled, like, sandwich of all these different beings. Human beings, they lived in a certain reality, but there were beings that lived on these other realities that intersected ours. And according to them, there were these beings that fed off of humans the same way we feed off of cows and chickens. And that's how they viewed us. They saw us as sources of energy, so they would hunt humans and they would feed off of their energy. Now, again, this is what they believed at that time. Obviously, there's some truth to that, but I'm going to be telling you what those predatory spirits really are. They're not off on some spaceship hanging out in Saturn. They're not, whatever the most popular thing is now. They're not the archons seeking to, although the world is controlled by rulers who do want to feed off of your energy, but they're not spiritual entities, they're human beings. These people, the reality that they lived in is they had the experience. By the way, experience doesn't mean it's true. They had this experience that there were spiritual predatory beings that hunted humans and fed off of them. So they needed the power to be able to first defend themselves, and then later it became completely destroying and defeating them. And by the way, I teach practices that I learned that have a connection going all the way back to those first demon hunters, and they did learn how to completely destroy demons. And if you put the practice into it and you're willing to shift your insides and get the energy, you'll be able to destroy demons with your bare hands, if not simply your energy. Okay, so the core belief is that predatory spirits feed off of humans. Shamans sought power to fight these demons. The energy practices they developed came from practical trial and error. This is really important. This isn't a religion. If you just believe in this, you'll be whatever. These are people who are having practical trial and error situations where they are trying different methods to gain power. And if it didn't work, they would drop it and they would do something else. And if something worked, they would do it. And then, of course, they would perfect it and they would teach it. So it's important to understand this. You hear me say this all the time. And that is that I never take anybody's word for anything. If somebody tells me something or throws an assumption out there or a belief or says if you do this, X and Y will happen, I have to go and experience it. Like, for instance, as you know, I'm an extraterrestrial contactee. I can't stop talking about my communications with ETs. But just 4 years ago, I didn't believe ETs exist. I didn't believe they existed until I saw Dr. Greer's movie, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, human-initiated contact with extraterrestrials, and I said, I don't buy that for a second. I'm going to go prove this wrong. So I did exactly what he said you should do. And I did it, and the exact opposite happened. I had personal, verifiable, visceral experiences. If you go watch my first videos about that, how I became an extraterrestrial, you'll see what happened to me. I proved it to myself. The same is true with these energies that I work with and with these practices that I teach. I proved it to myself. So that is a very good mindset to have. And this is the reason why I'm pointing this out, is that this was Taoism. The original Taoists, even before they used that word, by the way, they didn't use that word in the beginning, but that came later. But these people who started this, they were only after experiencing and finding the truth and finding things that worked. So their energy practices were from practical trial and error. Shamans discovered raw power was very dangerous. The first shamans died at a young age while seeking power. That's why it's important to have a teacher. That's why, in India they say that you have to have a guru if you're going to do Kundalini, otherwise it's dangerous. Well, the same is true with the energies that I currently work with. These energies are extremely powerful. And the reason why it's dangerous isn't because the energy itself is necessarily dangerous, it's because of how we respond to it. And it is also true. I've been doing these practices for 30 years, and I've done something that I don't think anybody else has done. I've never heard anybody do it, and I'm okay if other people have, but I think it's also possible I may be the first person in human history to do what I'm about to say. I found a way to combine the three energy practices. Kundalini yoga, Qigong, and the third energy is the unknown energy used for fighting demons, which is the Qi, the heart-mind energy. This is pure electromagnetic energy that is coming directly from higher dimensions. All humans have it, but it's self-contained so that you don't harm yourself. But when you release that and you plug it into higher dimensions and you channel those higher dimensional electromagnetic energies, those energy jolts through you and through your body, you become a completely different being. You become a walking demon fighter. The danger is what happens to you psychologically, and that's why you need a teacher. So that's why all of you who are doing these practices, there's a lot of people, and I'm glad you are, you've bought the videos that I teach, but only a very small amount of you are actually working with me. You need to be working with me to know how to integrate your psyche into these energies. So anyway, let's keep going. So the first shamans died at a young age seeking power. Now what I was going to say earlier is that my first attempts at unifying Kundalini yoga with Maoshan heart energy practices actually resulted in me giving myself some serious energy problems. I burnt out a few fuses, and it was really traumatizing and traumatic. In case you want to know where the Hool breath came from, I was doing this because I had reached the end of learning with my Maoshan teacher, and I knew I wasn't done. So I started going into some other stuff that I had practiced, going deep into Kundalini yoga, and my energy was all over the place, and it was actually quite painful. So in meditation, I simply said, if there are any higher dimensional, I didn't use the word higher dimensional, if there are any higher masters out there, give me a practice that will balance my energies. And immediately I was given the Hool breath. So that is what helped me to first get those energies together. I've since been able to put them safely together so that you can have access to all of these energies, and your body will be able to absorb it and metabolize it. So the first shamans discovered that raw power was dangerous, and the first shamans, Taoist shamans, died at a young age seeking power. Shamans sought personal freedom first. Okay, so that isn't the same as religion. Western religion, especially the Abrahamic monotheism, that seeks to gain approval, to gain salvation. It's even different from even Buddhism that seeks to gain enlightenment. You're looking for they're not the same, but they're in the same kind of ballpark. The Taoists were different. They didn't see life as being spiritual and physical. It was just life. And within life, there was all of these different things. And they sought to be independent of any force that might hold them captive. It started in the beginning with the first shamans seeking to be demon hunters. They were doing that so that they could gain their own independence, gain their own self-empowerment, their own individuality. Again, a long time ago, you had to be self-reliant and self-sufficient. Again, this was about survival. So Taoism is really about that. And not Taoism, people, I'm not talking about philosophical Taoism, where you only read the Tao Te Ching and you intellectualize it. Now, the Tao Te Ching is something you do after the fact. After you've done the practices and you try to integrate it, then you read the Tao Te Ching to help you integrate the practices. It's not meant to be, was never intended to be used on its own. It was intended to help you realize your energy experiences in this multiverse that we live in. Again, very practical. So the shamans sought personal freedom first. Their secondary function was to protect others. So again, unlike religion, where somebody becomes a priest, like somebody becomes a Catholic priest to serve God and help people. So religion tries you to become a servant first. Jesus was like that. He was, I am not me, I'm here to serve and to save. And that is completely different from Taoism. A Taoist would look at that and go, what? That sounds ridiculous. It goes against the whole understanding of the whole point is to be self-empowered and to be independent and to be able to expand into your highest essence. So the secondary function was to help others. Taoists sought freedom from human consensus. This is important to understand. So human consensus is the collective unconscious. And I can tell you this is a real physical thing. I used to experience this, I started going backpacking in the Sierras by myself, but I started doing that when I was in my late teens. And I did it all through my young adulthood. And every year I would go up into the southern Sierra Mountains where you're hiking over 14,000 foot passes into these lush valleys in the middle. I mean, it was, ultimate wilderness. And I would go there late in the season in September by myself so that I wouldn't be around other people and I would just be connected to that wilderness. And I've talked about it. I can talk about what happened to me pretty much every time I did that. But when I would come out of the mountains and I'd hike down and I'd get back to my car and I'd start driving down the mountain, right at about 5,000 feet, as I'm coming down from the mountain, I would hit this energy barrier. And then as soon as I did, I would feel a huge energetic change. My thoughts would change. I would feel this oppression hit me, and I would usually weep. I'd be crying as I was going down the rest of the mountain because it was so painful to be disconnected from the purity that I had just, experienced. And so I can tell you that the human consensus is a real thing, and unless you have been out somewhere, whether out in the middle of the ocean by yourself, even that's not as much, but getting out into real wilderness where you don't have a phone, you don't have any internet, you don't have anything that connects you to other people, and you just have the power of nature touching you, working with you, connecting with you, then you start to understand how heavily you are infected by this consensus, the collective unconscious. So Taoists sought freedom from the human consensus. This is again 10,000 years ago. This is thousands and thousands of years ago. They knew that to be part of a city, to be part of even a village, to be part of a religion, a society, a country, they knew that was programming them, and they sought to avoid that. That is where you start to lose your power. And again, the beginning of Taoism is they were seeking power, spiritual power. To be part of a consensus took that power away from them. So Less powerful Taoists became priests. So they would do rituals to protect the village, to bless the child, to do exorcisms, to have a good harvest and all of that. And they had to do that because they were less powerful. They needed to have human beings to pay for them, to provide for them. And so they had to provide a service in exchange for being given the resources by other humans to live. So these were people who weren't the most powerful. They were maybe at the highest level of, you have the consensus, and they were sort of at the highest part of the consensus energy. But there were Taoists that went beyond that. So the more powerful Taoists became hermits. So they sought to go off and live in the forests, to live in the mountains, to live with the spirits, because that was a higher frequency. And so, the same is true. We see this in ancient European society, in the fairy tales. The person that the understanding we have of wizards is that they're dangerous. Right? And so these are our ancestors, those of us who are of European descent. Wizards are dangerous. They're unpredictable. They live on the outskirts. They don't live in the village. They live on the outskirts. You only call them in when you need their help. The rest of the time, you better stay away from these guys, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what they're going to do. And that's because they were on a higher frequency, and they were also seeking power, a spiritual power. But really what it meant is that their frequency, when they would come into a place where there was a consensus, it would start to destroy that. Just their frequency would destroy people's ability to unify unconsciously and create that bubble of consensus. So that's why they were both loved and hated at the same time. It's always been that way. That's why even up until recently, the Maoshan Taoists were called sorcerers and evil black magicians. But it's because they had so much power, and they were operating on such a high frequency, that anybody who wants to live in the consensus and profit from the consensus is going to badmouth them. And this is why all of the other Taoist sects, the Huashan, the Wudang Shan, they would attack the Maoshan. We're talking 100, 200 years ago. They would attack the Maoshan Taoists unless they needed somebody to come and fight off demons. Then they would pay them to come and fight off demons, and then they would say, get the hell out of here. And as soon as they were gone, they would say, you have to watch out for those guys. They're evil. They worship demons, and they poke. Some guy asked me this. His name was Carl Totem. He's since passed away, and he was an abbot, a Taoist abbot in California, and I went to his temple, his studio, to learn from him. And as soon as I told him what type of Taoism I was practicing, he said, "Oh, that stuff is evil. Evil spirits jump inside of you. You gain a lot of power, but that power will kill you." And then next time I came back, he wouldn't even let me in. He was so afraid of me. But that's only because the other Taoist sects sought to get government approval and government funding, and so they were seeking again to be part of the elite, to have power, just enough power to control other people so they could benefit off of it. Real Taoists, the highest, most powerful ones, they didn't want that. But as a result, nobody understood them and people were afraid of them, and rightly so. Because if you sit in the presence of a real high-level master, they will start destroying your programming. Your consensus bubble will start to be destroyed. Okay, so the two functions of the early Taoists was to, one, fight against predatory demons. So we've already talked about that. I'm going to give you some important information about what those predatory demons really are. The second thing that they would do is they repaired the fabric of reality. This I found to be very interesting. I just did some research and I found this out, that these were the two functions of the early Taoists, the early shamans, before they even called themselves Taoists. Their entire purpose was, number one, to fight against predatory demons who were a threat to the human race. And the second thing they did was they repaired the fabric of reality. So that they had an understanding that the matrix, we would call it 3D, that it was constantly being destroyed and recreated. I've been telling you about this, the quantum understanding that we live in infinite probable realities and we're constantly manufacturing. We're not shifting timelines. We're not moving forward in time. We are continuously recreating reality based on the most likely probability that is connected to our internal reality. So they understood that. And they understood that the fabric of reality would fall apart and they would go and repair it. So they understood how to create their own reality. This is why they were seen as magicians. This is why they would appear and disappear and be able to do all kinds of intense, crazy things. For them, what they were doing is they were destroying and recreating reality, because they understood that reality was quantum in nature. And just as I was told, the first extraterrestrial that I communicated with, he said to me, "You are a probability." And I said, "Yes, I know. Everything is possible." And he repeated himself. He said, "You are a probability." And he said that over and over again. Huge amounts of energy hitting me as he said that. And so I had to sit with that and really understand the whole understanding of infinite probabilities being created as opposed to infinite possibilities we can jump to at any time. It's completely different. The early Taoists understood this. So again, their two main functions were to fight demons who were a threat to human existence, and they would repair the fabric of reality. So modern Taoists seek immortality. Those first Taoists, they would die young because they didn't know how to absorb the energy. They may have not understood psychologically, how to use it. My teachers would say, the reason why we teach this stuff secretly, because I did. I went to a secret class, and that I wasn't allowed to tell anybody what I was doing. I wasn't allowed to. Nobody was allowed to just walk in. They had to be invited in, and I wasn't allowed to publicly say anything about it. And the reason was because they would say this stuff is extremely dangerous. Number one, people are frightened of it, and number two is that there's a very rare chance that somebody can come along and use this power selfishly and become, and they would say, like a Darth Vader. So for them, Star Wars wasn't a movie, it was a documentary. And Darth Vader was just simply a Maoshan Taoist who psychologically, wasn't able to integrate it, and he was able to keep his narcissistic selfishness in that level of power. Usually what happens, I've seen this over and over again, usually what happens is that when people feel the intense power, they run the other way because they go through huge psychological shifts. Since that's already happening now, since the world is shifting and more people are going through these psychological shifts simply because the earth is raising her frequency and that the sun is raising her frequency as this hits the earth. Now people are ready for the Maoshan practices because it's helping that process. But 10, 20, 30 years ago, the average person, if they felt this energy, they would go run the other way. My teachers would say, if you're doing the spirit fighting, there's something wrong with you. And they weren't joking. They mean like there's something broken in you, and this is the only thing that can fix you. You need something this powerful. Because the average person just doesn't need to go through the intense psychological shifts that happen. They don't need it, they don't want it. If you want this, it means that there's something broken inside. So now everybody's ready for it, though. All right, so modern Taoists seek immortality, and they now understand that they've been working with all of these, trial and error energy practices, and they've come to figure out that you can gain power and you can gain health and you can stay alive and you can protect yourself from evil and you can become an awakened immortal. You can become what they called a perfected immortal. So that's what they sought. They sought to become gods. And really what it meant was to awaken to the God you already are. Let's keep going. Okay, so the shamanic view of the matrix is that the soul is already enlightened in its original state. So you don't need to achieve enlightenment. So one of the misunderstandings about Kundalini and rising of Kundalini is people think that as Kundalini rises up the spine, you're evolving spiritually. There's some truth to that, but that's really kind of an illusion. And so the idea is that once you've come up here, then you're awakened, and now you are awakened when before you weren't. And the Taoist understanding is that you're already there. You're already it. You're already God. And what happens isn't that you need to be awakened to become God. It's that you have to avoid being corrupted into a lesser, less conscious state, which also means less connection to the spirit, less connection to spiritual power and energy. That's where all this understanding about power, what they learned is that spiritual power is necessary so that you can create an energy field around yourself where then you can return to your original state. And so that's what they were seeking, to create a scenario where they could get back to their original pre-birth, pre-incarnation state. Then you'd be a god. So the soul is already enlightened in the original state. The soul becomes corrupted when it agrees to be eaten. All right, so these are my words. You're not going to find this in any text. I'm trying to explain to you what was really going on in the beginning 10,000 years ago when these first shamans realized that there were these predatory spirit beings that were seeking to feed off of humans. And so what's really happening is that the human being becomes corrupted from the original state. And when the human being becomes corrupted from their original state, modern New Age people would say your frequency gets lower. That's accurate. And then what ends up happening is then you become corrupted. You lose your energy. And you become food for these predatory beings that are running around. So the way they saw it, the early ones that they saw it, is that these predatory beings, just like humans when they go out and hunt. Actually, wolves is a better idea. Wolves don't go chasing after the biggest buck. Wolves go chasing after the sick, the weak, and the young. This actually is helpful to the herd, because then genetically, any weak genetics gets wiped out. They're actually very helpful to the herd. And so the same idea was true, that these predatory evil beings that were going around looking to feed off of humans, they're looking for the easiest prey. They're not going to try and take down the strongest person. Like, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. The whole idea is to feed, not to lose your energy. So the soul becomes corrupted when it agrees to be eaten. So I learned this a long time ago. I was an exorcist many, many years ago. And I stopped doing exorcisms because I learned very quickly that anybody who becomes possessed agreed to it. They may not consciously know it, they may not remember it, but that is exactly what happened. Not only did they agree to it, but they unconsciously sought it out. They sent out messages asking for some being to come and distract them from their pain. And the demon shows up because the demon feeds off of negativity, and here's what happens. May not be, this is the verbal interaction, but this is the energetic contract. But if we were to put it in words, it would go like this. The demon would show up and say, hey, I got your message. You need somebody to possess you? The person would say, yeah, I was really traumatized as an infant or as a small child, and the pain is beyond comprehension. It's killing me. I need something to distract me from that while still giving me the experience of being a victim. And the demon says, that's perfect. I'll scare the crap out of you. I'll attack you. I'll physically abuse you. And all of that energy that comes out of you, I will feed off of that. And you say, yeah, take it. I'll create all the fear, just as long as I don't have to really look at the true pain. The demon says, no problem. I will totally distract you from that. This is victim mentality, by the way. Victim mentality is a last-ditch effort to avoid real pain. So this is why I don't coddle people who are victims, because there's no such thing. So humans, the soul becomes corrupted when it agrees to be eaten. Human society is a bubble of denial from the original state. So we are already perfect when we get here. We are already everything. The idea is to go back to the state of nothing, which means our human 3D virtual reality character, that's something. That's something we're wearing. So if you take off your clothes and you get to your naked true soul, you're this shining, beautiful thing, and you're perfect already. So if you're not perfect, then it means that you have been corrupted from your original state. How does that happen? The way that I explained what happens when a demon attacks somebody, it's you're choosing, you're asking to have something get in between you and your original state. So this is what society does. Society becomes this safety mechanism from the empty purity of your true soul. Because when you become connected to the truth of your soul, you go to a state of purity and emptiness and unbelievable power. But there's no place for the human ego. So the human ego gets destroyed. Same with Odin's sacrifice, self-sacrifice on the tree of life. Odin sacrificed himself to himself. And as a result of that, he became the king of the gods. It means that he died to his human understanding of his 3D virtual reality avatar. So understand that the shift that is happening, the awakening that is happening is this. And if there is going to be, two different levels of reality, the people who are going to shift to the higher level are going to be those who are willing to have their ego destroyed. And I don't mean ego in the way that most of you think. When most people talk about having no ego, what they really mean is they're virtue signaling, saying, I'm totally humble, I don't need anything from myself, I don't have an ego. That is the exact opposite. That is virtue signaling, and that is an outright lie that people say in order to get accepted. Now, that might be completely unconscious. Consciously, they might think that they're following the true path of the egoless state. But in reality, what they're wanting is they're wanting to be seen and loved and approved of. This is what happens with people who have been narcissistically abused, especially children, going through complex trauma. post-traumatic stress. What happens is you seek to appease your abuser by not having a self. So there's a difference between having your ego destroyed and having your identity destroyed. Those are two different things. Your identity is your original God self. You are the most powerful, most beautiful being that has ever existed. Your ego says, I have to earn love by being beautiful, by being rich, by being strong, by being powerful, by being well-known, pick it. It's something that you do or something that is external to you that gives you your value or your worth, including how humble. Oh, I'm so humble. Jesus, I'm not a Christian, obviously, but that's what Jesus portrays, is the ultimate codependent blanket. Oh, I don't have an ego. I'm nobody. Oh, yes, God, punish me for others. It's pure reverse narcissism. It is the ultimate in narcissism. So that has to be destroyed. And Taoism seeks that out. Now, these early Taoists figured that out the hard way. So I told you earlier that the early Taoists, a lot of them died young as they were seeking power. Because what was happening is the more power they gained, they would turn into these Darth Vaders, which is ego connected to spiritual power. That'll kill you. I could give you stories. I've seen people who became very powerful energetically, who were very egotistical, and I could tell you some real nasty horror stories. This is why the more power that I gain, the less I try and show it off to the world. This is why, the light beings were very clear. When I started learning this, they said, if you misuse this, we will take it away from you. So the amount of power that I have compared to how I use it, there's a big difference. Because I understand now, having connected to these higher dimensional realms, that the only thing that matters is going back to your original state. What the light beings call coming home. They're saying that all the time. We're bringing you home. You're coming home. That's what they mean by that. All right, so humans addicted to society bubble are easy prey. So if you want to live in society and be accepted by society, you are easy prey. Remember last time I was telling you about, answer this question, if I only had fill in the blank, I'd be happy? Money. If you think money is going to bring you happiness, you are easy prey. If you think power, you're now easy prey. If you think possessions, if you need to be loved by others, if you need anything other than your true original self, you've now corrupted yourself. You've put back on your human avatar suit, and now you are easy prey. Because you will give away, you will sell yourself in exchange for this. This is what selling your soul to the devil really means. You want to feel like you have security. Okay, buy a house. Well, you're not really buying it. What you're doing is, I'm going to lend you the money, me being the bank, and then you're going to pay that off with a huge interest. But you're going to have to repair it. I'm not going to repair it even though I own it. And if you don't pay me when I tell you, I'm going to come and take it, and I won't give you your money back. But the thought of the security of owning a house in order to get that's really, people throw their lives away just for homeowner. That's just one example. We already know, we're now seeing what happens to people who become celebrities. The way they have to give their soul away in exchange for all of the notoriety, all of the popularity, all of the money, all of that. So this is what happens when you give yourself away to the consensus of the third dimensional social bubble. So humans addicted to society bubble are easy prey. Taoists who escape society bubble become immune. This is why they sought to live out in the wilderness. This is why, and again, the Mao Shan is a great example. The Mao Shan were the first Taoists officially that went off and created their own mountain monastery and all of that. And a lot of people would leave. They'd learn some of the stuff. They'd go leave and start their own, the Hua Shan, the Wudang Shan, for example. They would start their own Taoist monasteries. But then they sought to be supported by the state, supported by the kings. The Mao Shan didn't. They were actually chased out of northern China by the governments. So for years, these guys had to hide in the mountains. That's why South China became where all the Mao Shan folk Taoists lived, is because they'd live in the mountains there where, you couldn't, a lot of the government forces couldn't find them. So, Taoists who escaped a society bubble became immune to being prey. But the two types of predatory demons, this is very important. The first one is external demons of emotions that feed off of negative human emotions. That is what I described earlier, what happens to people, everybody that I used to do exorcisms on. Every time that I'm not, listen, 95% of people who contact me saying that they're being attacked by demons are not being attacked by demons. At least not the kind that they think. But I'm talking about actual demons that possess people, and I've seen them completely transform. I've seen them, one case I saw a guy completely transform. Like, he had normal human skin, and then he turned into this completely physical, unreal being that didn't have any irises or just red. Eyes were completely red. The skin turned to chalk. It was just as white as a sheet of paper, and looking right at me. So those beings exist. And that only happens when you have given your soul away, as I said, in the ways that I described. So that is the first kind of demon. And that demon feeds off of your emotional instability. It helps to create it and then feeds off of it. There's a second kind of demon, and this is the one that most people suffer from. And that is the internal parasite that feeds off of human energy from within the person. The big C people have in their body. That's one of them. But there's an interesting one, like the Taoists, 2,000 years ago, the Mao Shan talked about the parasites in the mind that feed off of the person. And that is actually a psychological thing. And I'm here to tell you that most humans have this. It's not what you think. So I don't want you to think that there's an actual spirit parasite. That's not what it is. What it is psychologically speaking, there's a thing called the introject. 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 And an introject is when you want somebody's approval so badly that what ends up happening is you create within your mind a little virtual AI of them in your mind. This is what happens to people who, especially children who are abused in destructive home environments. In order to survive, they create a little introject of their parents, whether it's the mother or the father, because the one thing they don't want is they don't want to be rejected, because little babies back in caveman times, if they left them on a rock and walked away, that baby was not going to survive. So babies needed to be loved and be taken care of. And or if you've got an extremely abusive parent who you know is going to come after you and beat you or punish you for something, then you start, in order to protect yourself, you become super vigilant and you start trying to figure out all the different ways that you could piss them off, and you make sure not to do that. You also have a list of all the things that you can do that will make them happy so that they will be kind to you. And so then you create this little interject of that person in your brain who tells you what to do. This is why people walk around with shame. If you walk around feeling shameful all the time, you feel unworthy, unlovable, if you beat yourself up because, instead of doing 12 reps on some machine, you only did 10, because you only made X amount of money, because you only did this, or, you had a good time. I mean, I used to have physical pain when I would go surfing. And for the longest time, I didn't understand what was going on until I realized that what was happening is that I was unconsciously punishing myself for having a good time, because I had learned as a little kid, if I was happy, it would make my older brother unhappy, and he would come looking for me and he would, abuse me. If I was happy, he would find a way to abuse me. So I learned really quickly to beat myself up if I was happy. That's an introject. That's one of these internal parasites that feeds off of your energy, that tells you, that's constantly telling you negative things. That is a real thing, and it exists. And this is the cause of you losing all of your energy. Remember, the original goal of the proto-Taoists thousands of years ago was to become immune to being predated upon by creating powerful energy. And what they found over thousands of years was that if you are self-sabotaging, if you have guilt, if you have shame, and or if you need other people's approval, then you will leak energy out of you. And it's just like, sharks, they can tell, a drop of blood, from a mile away or whatever it is in a giant ocean, and they know exactly where to go. So demons are the same. They're running around and you're leaking all of this emotional energy because you're filled with shame, self-hatred, insecurity, craving other people's love, your codependence, or your narcissism. They can smell it and they come looking for it. But you've also got these little introjects, these little parasites that you've created that burrow into your mind. And then they just continue to what you do is, when your abuser isn't there, you abuse yourself in order to feel safe, in a twisted way, in order to feel loved. So, Taoist energy practices make one powerful, self-awakened, and immune to parasitic corruption. So this is what Qigong is all about. This is what working with the 5 elements is all about. This is what working and empowering the 3 ones. That's what all of this is about. That's what gives you the ability to be immortal, to be able to be energetically self-empowered. Because when you are no longer being corrupted and when your energy is not leaking out of you, then what ends up happening is you can increase that energy, which will increase you. The idea is, when you get back to your original self, you can choose to expand larger and larger and larger and larger. So this is what we do when we do these live guided interdimensional meditations. The reason why we do these twice a week is because these higher dimensional beings are giving you the ability to tap into your original self and expand, and allowing your ego to die. Now, ironically, they destroy your ego by telling you how amazing you are. And if on paper, if I was to write on paper, you are a god and you created the world, if I was to hand you that on paper and you were to read that intellectual, you'd go, yeah. But when there's a being in a higher dimension who has power that you've never felt before, and they have love, they truly see you and they love you in your true self, and when they tell you that, when that energy hits you, it doesn't feel good. It makes you feel shameful. It makes you feel frightened. You talk yourself out of it. That's because it's your ego being destroyed. What happened to Odin when he died to himself? He became king of the gods. He wasn't king of the gods before he died to himself. You're not king of the gods right now, but if you listen to who you truly are and you die to your ego, you don't need anybody to love you. You don't need external things like money or possessions. You don't need power or reputation. You just need to connect to your true self. When that's where you're at, you will embrace, yeah, I am. I am the king of this universe. I am the creator of this world. And, big deal. And you have no ego about it. Okay, so Taoist energy practices make one powerful, self-awakened, and immune to parasitic corruption. Taoism is not a religion, because the practitioner awakens to their own godhood through the spiritual science of energy experience. And so that's why, I don't follow any Taoist thing. Even the Tao Te Ching, it's great, but the understanding of Taoism is that there is no Taoist hierarchy, there is no Taoist leader. I mean, you can call yourself a Taoist master or a Taoist abbot. You can give yourself whatever title you want. It doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. The only thing that has any meaning is your trial and error experience with spirit, with energy. And you either fail or you succeed. And those that succeed gain power. And they gain power not because they followed any rules, but because they found a way to get back to their original self and expand into their true energy. And this is what I've come to find out all of the light beings are. And when we're done with this third dimensional reality and we go up to a higher frequency, we're going to realize there is no religion. There is no ruling God that's ruling and telling anybody what to do. There is only awakening, continuous awakening to the truth within yourself. And that doesn't matter whether you're in 3D or 5D or 12D, it's all the same. So, anyway, I'm going to stop babbling now. I hope this was helpful for you. Here's what you can do to get started with this, because this, what I just told you, all this intellectual information, probably will not do anything to you. But what does, this is why I am constantly hammering away, do the practices. The practices is your connection, trial and error with energy, connecting you to your original self, destroying your introjects, destroying your ego. That is a personal experience, and it either works or it doesn't. But you have to have energy. As the original Taoists got right, what you need is spiritual power. And these practices give you direct access to that. So, what is it that we do? Scroll in your mind all the way down to where it says or just above number 1, it says activate the higher naval power frequency. We are in the first phase of a 3-phase awakening into 5D. The first phase is the naval center is going to be activated, empowered, cleansed, and awakened. Here's how you can do that. You don't have to wait around for it to happen, you can do it. Number 1, the Mao Shan energies. You've heard that name already. So the first one is summoning immortals. I recommend that for everybody who's brand new. You go to thunderwizard.com, you click on shop. You will see, you scroll down, you'll see Mao Shan summoning the immortals, moving Qigong 5D shift. Everybody can do that. It's real inexpensive. It is one of the higher level practices that I teach, and I created it for people who are listening to me say that the Mao Shan energy is more powerful than anything. I don't expect you to believe me. I don't want you to believe me. I want you to find out for yourself. Do that practice. Do that energy practice and find out. If you feel the energy, then you know I'm telling you the truth. And if you know I'm telling you the truth, I encourage you to keep going. So the next thing to do is to do the Celestial Qigong. That again, thunderwizard.com, click on shop, and you will see right there, Celestial Qigong, the foundation of Mao Shan energy work. That will teach you the basics of the energy, open up the Qi, the heart-mind electromagnetic energy, and release it into the body. This will connect you directly to higher dimensions. You'll have a basic understanding. Now your energy body will be ready for even higher dimensional experiences. And the lightning qigong, that can be done if you go to thunderwizard.com and click on membership. Then you'll see Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong. Click on that. That will activate your kundalini, it will activate your qi, and it will activate the Shi, the heart mind. Then to really get things going, I recommend everybody do this no matter what level you're at. Number 2, I have Xuan Wu Qigong. So the Xuan Wu practice is this, Dark Warrior of the North, Tortoise and Snake, and that you can get by going here to maoshan.thunderwizard.com. That's me doing the last part of it where you gather yin and yang. And the deity known as Xuan Wu, the Dark Warrior of the North, he is the master of the macrocosmic yin and yang, and he is also the master of earth and water, and he has the ability to completely transform your navel center. When that happens, your true mind will awaken, because that's where your mind is. Your true mind is in your navel center, and when that is awakened, you will be able to see a new reality and then be able to create it. So I think everybody should be doing that form, and you can get that, as I said, maoshan.thunderwizard.com or thunderwizard.com in the shop. Go look for it, you'll find it. All right, so the 5-element Mao Shan forms. 2 ways to do that, maoshan.thunderwizard.com. The shop at thunderwizard.com. Again, you'll see it. If you click on shop, you will see wood there at the bottom left, and then you see up at the right metal, fire, water. There's also earth. Get all those 5 elements. You need the 5 elements in order to get the emotions. Let's go back to the beginning of this. These guys spent thousands of years finding ways to tap into energy, to find the energies that function within the world. This science took thousands of years of these shamans working like crazy in order to stay alive. And they've come to understand that you have 5 emotions, you have 5 internal organs. If your emotions are not smoothly functioning, you're going to be stuck in one or bloated in another, weak in others, and this is going to cause disease. It's going to make you prey to the predatory narrative bubble. So you need to have all those energies flowing, and that's what the Mao Shan 5-element practices are all about there. I recommend everybody who's serious about opening up their navel center that they do that. The next thing that I recommend is the Hands of Infinity. So that's for everybody who's done the 5-element practices. Go to the Hands of Infinity. It's called the from one hand to infinity, and it is so powerful for the navel center. There's nothing more powerful. Xuan Wu is very powerful in its own way, but that's really accessing the mind. The Hands of Infinity gives you access to the power to create. It'll also fend away all negativity. So when your lower Dantian, your lower self, your navel center is fully awakened, it destroys all of the evil influences. It gets rid of bad luck. It gets rid of tragedy, all of that stuff. All of the, it'll protect you. So it destroys evil starting from the bottom by getting rid of all of the negative influences and the bad luck. When we move up to the heart center, which I'm about to start releasing, those practices for the heart center, that gives you the ability to chase away negativity. Actual demons will run. And it creates the ability for you to become immortal. Remember, an immortal is somebody who has access to all of their energy and their true self. Your soul is in your heart. So that's the Maoshan practices for the heart. The Maoshan practice for the third eye, that will give you the ability to destroy demons, literally with the energy in your hands. You can walk into a room. I mean, this has happened. I remember one time I walked into a yoga class, and this is when I was training 3-4 hours every day, and I had all kinds of crazy energy, and I was working on these sets. And I walked into a yoga class, and I started doing, some of the sets in the corner, and a woman was lying down, and she bolted up. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just doing my practices." And then she said, that went right through me. And then it was like she was like a marionette. Something just pulled her straight up and she walked out. Like she didn't have any control over her body. It was the craziest thing. I found out later that she had been communicating with a ghost in her house. So she had an evil spirit attached to her. And all I did was just come in and I did a little bit of... That's this. Once this is awakened, you can kill these evil beings with power. So here we are 10,000 years later, and we now have the full practice to do what those brave guys were doing 10,000 years ago. They were killing themselves because they were seeking power and it was destroying them. They didn't know how to balance it. Now we do. So if you'd like, you can put a question in the comments. If you have any question about these practices, I'll be happy to answer them. I read all the comments. And you already know where to go and where to start. And please show up every Wednesday, that one's tomorrow, Wednesday and Saturday at 8:30 p.m. And we'll do the live guided meditations. And there's other things you can do if you want to get an actual reading from me where I channel the light beings. You can go to channel.thunderwizard.com. If you want to learn an advanced way to interact with these beings, go to contact.thunderwizard.com and you'll learn what I do, how what I've created and learned from, again, trial and error with these light beings, what works and what doesn't, and how you can have a deeply powerful experience with higher dimensional beings who are actively trying to not only empower you, but help you shift the world. Okay, I think that's it. I love you guys all. Please be very good to yourselves. And I will see you all very soon.